Let me go to the economic situation now, and Treasurer Jim Chalmers has been giving mixed messages ahead of the federal budget tomorrow week. On the one hand, he's warning that the world is on the edge of a fiscal cliff and we need to tighten our belts, while at the same time he's unveiling a generous extension of paid parental leave from 18 to 26 weeks. Here's the Treasurer speaking this morning about how the risk of Australia's economy plunging into recession is upon us.
It's our expectation and obviously our hope that Australia will avoid recession. We've got a lot going for us in this country. We've got low unemployment. We've got relatively solid growth, relatively solid demand. We've got good prices for people that people are paying for our commodities around the world.
Let me bring in Simon Cowan from the Centre for Independent Studies. Thanks for joining us, Simon. Are we headed for recession or not? Australia, that is. Obviously, we're talking about the UK and the US being in recession, but can Australia avoid it?
Look, it remains a possibility that we can avoid recession. We've had pretty good luck in avoiding recessions over the last 3 decades. But unfortunately for us, those headwinds that you're talking about in the UK, but especially in the US, there's a significant possibility that they might impact us negatively. But we've got that sort of perfect storm effect coming where we're seeing the RBA raise interest rates again and again and again. The US Fed is raising interest rates harder and faster than we are here. And we're coming off a fairly good economic set of circumstances. What we've seen over the last decade is a fairly low level of investment or concern for the productive capacity of the economy. So we spent a lot of time talking about who we can distribute our tax dollars to, and a lot less about how we can build sustainable and robust growth into the future. And so there's a lot of risk factors there that might result in a recession if things don't go our way this time.
Now, obviously, our budget's in a fair bit of strife, although it's a lot better now than it looked at the election because it's $50 billion to the better because the economy's done better than expected. But so Jim Chalmers is trying to say, oh, it's this terrible dire budget situation, yet he's going to spend more on paid parental leave. Is this, as he says, an investment? We'll actually get more back from that in productivity, or is it just a cost to the budget?
Look, it seems unlikely that it's going to deliver significant productivity increases. Unlike a lot of other social policies, the paid parental leave scheme, the original one that was introduced back in 2012, has been fairly extensively evaluated. What we saw with that evaluation was that the increase in the government provision of paid parental leave really only impacted about 5 to 10% of families into staying at home longer with their kids. So the impact of that massive government expenditure, in those days it was $1.5 billion, it's now closer to $3 billion. That expenditure really only influenced a small number of people. It did, of course, provide benefit to a number of families who no doubt gratefully took that cash. We'll see the same thing this time. It's unlikely to deliver enormous productivity benefits because if you're talking about workforce participation, it's not the period of time immediately following birth that we need to worry about mothers' workforce participation. It's the period 5 years until kids get into school, and then probably 5 or 10 years after that where we see a significant decline in female workforce participation. So this is more of what you might describe as an equity measure rather than a productivity one.
So that would be right, a political measure as well rather than a productivity one. Do you expect that spending overall will increase in next week's budget?
It's going to be very difficult to see how it won't increase. Labor, at the time of last budget, was talking about how they would have had a bigger deficit. That was the line that they took to the election. There's a possibility that because our economic circumstances are slightly better, that we'll see some reductions. And it's always possible that Labor will cut some schemes they don't particularly like. But the reality is we've seen nothing from Chalmers thus far, and certainly nothing from Albanese, that would indicate they're going to divert from their plans of increasing spending and delivering to some of those constituencies that they feel gave them an electoral boost. So it's unlikely to see a significant cut that would affect the budget bottom line.
Yeah, I think that $50 billion improvement, instead of banking it, they're going to try and toy with some of those dollars. Thanks for joining us, Simon.
My pleasure, absolutely.
Simon Cowan there from the Centre for Independent Studies.